Dear God, we thank you that it is you and only you and nobody else and nothing else, God. I don't need to tick a box. I don't need to achieve an award. I don't need to win a prize, God. You are just there waiting for us. And God, sometimes it feels like you're not there, God. Sometimes it feels like it's too late. But you are the God not only of the if-onlys, God. You are the God of the but-onlys. It is you and only you, Lord. So would my words be your words, God? Would this sermon be your sermon, God? Would people be touched, God? Would you take us somewhere, God, we don't want to go? To go to a place, Lord, we didn't think was possible. In your name, amen, amen. You may be seated. Turn to somebody this morning and say, if only. If only. It's a dangerous, dangerous phrase. Thank you, Bruce. I'm reading this morning from John 11. We've been looking at John these past couple of weeks since the start of March. And I am going to look at John 11. I'm really going to look at only John 11. I think I had another chapter to look at, and it was like, I don't have enough time to do both chapters. Honestly, if we did John chapter by chapter, we'd be here till Christmas. So I am going to read this morning. In John, there are 7 signs or 7 miracles. The resurrection of Lazarus, if you don't know, spoiler, Lazarus dies and he gets resurrected. I think Dad took most of my message in that little MC spot before. So if you wrote down what he said, then you're probably good. You don't need to listen to me. But this is the 7th sign, the final sign. Most likely, the greatest sign that Jesus would do before his own resurrection on the cross for you and for I. This is a story for believers and non-believers. This is a story for when you said to God, where are you? And a story for when maybe you've cursed God or said, God, where are you? And you didn't even believe in him. This is a story for all of us. Everyone who has faced an unexpected. We all have a Lazarus in our story, in our walk today. John's purpose for writing this book is so that you and I might believe, so that his audience, his Hellenistic Jewish audience in Ephesus might believe not so much that Jesus was real, not so much that he was a good man that did miracles, but we would believe that he is who he said he is, that we would believe he is more than just the resurrection for Lazarus. He is the resurrection for you. He is the resurrection for me. He is the resurrection for your circumstances. Whatever it feels like that you may have buried or had to bury already, whatever dreams or plans that you feel like God didn't turn up, he is the resurrection for then, he's the resurrection for now, and he's the resurrection to come. Stephen Furtick notes that John had the insight of hindsight when writing John. John had the insight of hindsight. We would have believed that John had the synoptic gospels, that John had Matthew, Mark, and Luke already with him when writing. So he may have wanted to write different things or emphasize different things. But John had the insight of hindsight. I mean, he already spoils what's going to happen in John 1 when he says Jesus is the Word. The Word came into the world so that you and I might be saved. He already spoils what's going to happen because he wants his believers to know, hey, this Jesus I'm about to tell you about, these stories I'm about to tell you, they are more than just stories. This is more than just a recount. This is a message of hope and of faith and of resurrection. He knew who Jesus was, John did. He knew what Jesus had come to do. And matter of fact, he knew what Jesus did. So we already know Mary and Martha. We meet Mary and Martha in Luke 10. We meet another man named Lazarus in Luke 16, but scholars do not believe they are the same Lazarus. But we meet Mary and Martha, and Mary would anoint Jesus with perfume. But this doesn't happen in John until chapter 12. So for you and I, there's a familiarity between the characters already, except that Mary hasn't anointed Jesus in John until chapter 12. So you can only imagine that in this story, Mary and Martha cannot perceive chapter 12. They do not have chapter 12. They don't even have chapter 11. They just have that their brother has died. And I'm going to go through verse by verse, I think up to 46 verses this morning, if you stick with me, if you do not fall asleep. But I read a theologian commenting for why we don't have Lazarus anywhere else, Beck, if you would bring that quote up on the screen. In Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, Richard Bachman, theologian, favorably cites G. Thesison's theory of protective anonymity. Yes, anonymity. No, anonymity. According to which evangelists sought to shield individuals who were still living from persecution by not naming them. This is significant. If Lazarus was still alive during the synoptics of Matthew, Mark, and Luke when they were written, but died in the interim between their publication and the composition of John's Gospel, this likewise may account for the synoptic non-inclusion of the account and John's inclusion of it. If Lazarus' death have meant that he no longer needed protection from persecution, so that John was free to include the account of the raising of Lazarus by Jesus. What does that mean? If Lazarus was still alive when the first three were written, they maybe would have kept him out. If we read in John 12, the Pharisees are so angry. I mean, they've already tried to stone Jesus in John 10. So he's gone away. We'll have a little context breakdown. But they're so angry at what he's done. It says in the Bible, they don't deny it. There's no point of, they don't deny what Jesus has done to Lazarus. They don't dispute it. Rather, they are so angry with Jesus and who he might be or what he might do. Therefore, they're also so angry with Lazarus because Lazarus is the living embodiment of the sign that they plot to kill Lazarus. That is it. That's all you hear. From chapter 11, chapter 12, where they plot to kill Lazarus in chapter 12, 10 to 11, we do no longer hear from Lazarus. So that is the theory that some scholars, a lot of scholars, hold onto this morning, maybe why we don't have Lazarus anywhere else. The story concerns Lazarus, but he's simply about so much more than Lazarus. I mean, he's in it for one scene. It's a pretty big scene, don't get me wrong, and I'll get there. He's in it for one scene, but rather there are four groups or four kind of people we may identify within this story. First of all, there is the disciples. There is Martha and Mary, and then also the Jews that are with them. There is Lazarus himself, and lastly, there is the Pharisees. And if I have time, I will touch on the Pharisees this morning. But ultimately, in and amongst all of that is you and me and where we find ourselves in our season and where we fit. If you could bring up the map, please, Beck. So this would be Jerusalem. About 2 miles this way is Bethany. Bethany is the town where Mary and Martha are. And about 20 miles up, some people say north, some people say south, some people say just out of Jerusalem, we find the disciples and we find Jesus. Out of chapter 10, they had fled Jerusalem, potentially traveled to Galilee because they tried to stone him. They tried to seize him. It's about a day and a half's travel from where Jesus and the disciples are to Bethany, to Mary and Martha, and ultimately to Lazarus and the tomb. There is no car, there is no Uber. Does not sound like they have great running shoes to run the marathon either. There's not even a mention of a horse and a donkey that they might have. So 20 miles doesn't seem far, but I'm not planning on walking 20 miles just in one easy day in sandals and rocky. You know, like I can walk in my boots and I'll be okay for a time period. They did not have what we have. And so 20 miles, about a day and a half's travel. So first of all, let's start by reading John 11. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. Again, this doesn't happen until the next chapter. John's full of spoilers. But he might already know that his audience already has Luke. They might already know Mary and Martha. So John says, hey, this is going to be the same Mary. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Interesting, we haven't heard about Lazarus, but they describe him as the one you love. So the relationship between Jesus and Lazarus must have been so unique, so close that they don't even use his name. They send a servant, the servant travels to where they are, and he just says, the one you love is sick. How beautiful is that? In verses 4 to 6, it says, when he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for the glory of God, it is for God's glory, that the God's Son may be glorified through it. And you're like, sweet. No one's going to die. This is going to be great. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And again, John pointing out in hindsight, Jesus loved them. Jesus loved them so much that it says in verse 6, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. I don't know about you, when someone says, hey, the one you love, and that might be a bit too much. I don't know who the one you love may be. Maybe your spouse, and maybe your parents, maybe your children. I don't know who you subscribe to that name. But when they say, hey, I'm in help, I'm in trouble, you are the only one who can help me, generally we would drop everything and go. Generally. I don't know where Jesus would say he loved them so much that, hey, I'm going to stay 2 more days where we are. I'm going to stay 2 more days. Remember, the servant would have taken Jesus' message full of hope back to the sisters. But what the servant did not have was Jesus with him. They've sent this servant, he says about a 4-day period between the time where Jesus gets the message, or the servant is sent, Jesus gets the message, they stay 2 days, they go on the 3rd day, they get there on the 4th day, and they find out everything's not as it seems. But scholars believe the servant would have went he would have went on the 1st day. Lazarus is sick. Even by the time he would have got to Jesus, Lazarus would have already been dead. So can you imagine as the servant, whether you're meant to bring back Jesus or not, whether you can just take this message of hope, that Jesus says, hey, the sickness will not end in death. Awesome. It is for the God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. The servant would have been hopeful. The servant would have been expected. The servant had this message no one else had. And yet when he turned up to Bethany, when he turned up to the house, when he turned up to the tomb, everything was not as Jesus just said. But everything is in God's timing. And then he said to his disciples after the 2 days had passed, let us go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews, they tried to stone you, and yet you are going back. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks in night that they stumble, for they have no light. After he stepped there, 12 hours of sunlight would have equaled 1 full day. We're just going to work when sun up, sun down. There's no street lights. They would have had torches, sure, but there's no headlights. The horses don't have lights on them. There's nothing that says, hey, when the sun goes down, that's the end of our day. And Jesus says, hey, I've given you these 12 hours to walk in by light, to walk in by my light. But when you walk in the dark, you stumble. When you try and walk in the dark, you do it in your own strength. And again, if we remember, they are away from danger. The disciples are like, Jesus, you just told the servant he's not going to die, everything's going to be good. Why don't we just stay here? Why don't we just stay here where it's safe? Where people aren't throwing stones at us? It's probably not the best pastime to have. Don't throw stones, Lord. Bethany's right near Jerusalem. It's 2 miles away, Lord. Why don't we just stay? You said Lazarus is going to be good. It seems all good. The disciples were not keen on heading back towards danger or death. They were not keen. They wanted to stay with Jesus, but they were not keen on going back to where they might also be stoned. After he said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep and I'm going to wake him up. I love the disciples. I think we find ourselves as the disciples. And I think if we don't find ourselves as the disciples, we're lying to ourselves. If we do not read it as literally as they do, verse 12, his disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. That's good. What do you do when you're sick? You take a nap. What do you do when you're sick? Take medication, go to sleep. No one wants to be around you. No one wants to get what you have. Go to bed, lock yourself in your room, take a nap. You will feel better. It's great in hindsight that we look at the disciples as heroes. But can you imagine walking with Jesus? Jesus is always talking in symbols and they're so literal. And if we are not like that, then you are lying to yourself, because we would have been like that too. So then he told them plainly, thank you, Lord, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe, but let us go to him. And then Thomas, also known as Didymus, the twin, said to the rest of his disciples, let us go that we may die with him. There's this kind of comedic throwaway line there. Thomas is saying, yeah, let's do this, fine. We're going to go. He's going to go. We're going to follow him. That's kind of our job description at the moment. We don't have anything else to do. So if he's going to go, we're going to go. But hey, let's all just go die together. We don't want to die. But hey, I'm going to follow Jesus because, it's just sarcastic comedy. It's a bit of confusion, right? Because Jesus says, hey, this sickness is not going to result in death. And yet Jesus then literally is just like, hey, Lazarus is dead. What do you not understand about what I'm trying to tell you? What do you not understand about what I've shown you in all my signs so far? What do you not realize about me saying, hey, let us go? And spoiler alert again, his sickness does not result in death, though he may be dead. I think we identify ourselves with the disciples, this first group of people. We identify ourselves with them that, hey, if I was following Jesus of 3 years, I would be excellent at what is to come. I'd be excellent at what to do. When you see leaders and they have assistants and they usher and they know what to do, they do it at the right time. You have your best assistants in to help you get everything organized. And Jesus just looks like he has a ragtag group of guys following him that he's trying to. It's like a bad youth group. It's like when you get stuck, loosely described, when you get given, that's a better word, the job of mentoring and shepherding the boys that are only at youth group because they don't want to be anywhere else on a Friday night. Maybe they're at youth group because they might be interested in a girl, but they stink after games. They're not really attentive in worship. And when you try and get anything out of them, it's like, Jesus had the group of guys who did not excel, and yet he says, hey, you are coming with me every step of the way. For if you guys can get this, everybody can get this. If you guys can take what I'm teaching you now and apply it to when I'm not around, you will take my gospel forth. You will take the message forth. We identify that sometimes following Jesus means getting messy, getting out of our comfort zone, and going places where we did not want to go. And that was day 2 and day 3. And day 4, we get to verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Interesting, Jesus doesn't even make it to the house. Martha goes out to meet him. He doesn't even make it to the spot where the miracle was supposed to happen. Rather, he's not there. Martha has to go out and meet him. And many Jews had traveled from Jerusalem. So again, we might think that Lazarus was well known, not just amongst the people in Bethany, but potentially even the people in Jerusalem. That we must have been so well known that people had traveled out to comfort him. And it has been 4 days from the servant, the message, the staying of the 2 days to when they arrived. It has been 4 days. Max Lucado would say that not only was he not there to perform the miracle or to heal Lazarus, he was not even there to mourn with them. 3 days of really heavy mourning, 4 days of mourning, and then 30 days of just time of lament. He was not there for the most important part of mourning. He was not there at all. The only person that could have did not show up. And the 4 days is significant for the Jews in ancient times. They believed that the soul would be near, with, around the body for up to 3 days. And then after the 3rd day, the soul would be gone. The soul would not, there's nothing coming back. There's nothing coming back. There's no miracle left to happen. There's nothing that's going on. This soul would be gone. The body would be unrecognizable. And Jesus turns up on the 4th day. Not with the message of, I'm sorry, it's too late, but with the message of, just wait and see. So Martha goes out to him. She says, Lord Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You see, they know Jesus' miracles, right? They know who Jesus is. They know what he can do. And Lord, if you had been here, he would not have died. Martha says, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Interesting, she doesn't say, I know that even now you can still raise my brother. She goes, no, I know that God will give you whatever I ask. Whatever you will do for God, he will give it to you. I know, Lord, I kind of know who you are, but you weren't here when I needed you. You weren't here when we needed you, Lord, and this is the situation we find ourselves in. Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answers, I know he will rise again, but I know he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Martha says, Lord, I know he's going to rise again. I know we're all going to die. We're all going to rise again, Lord, in the resurrection of the last day. I know that's going to happen, Lord, but he's already dead. Don't tell me he's going to rise again. He's already dead. I know the last day. You know the last day, Lord. What do you mean? And Martha's resurrection, the final days for all of us, is again her literal. And Jesus says, hey, he's going to rise again. Do you not understand who I am? I am more than just the guy who turns water into wine. I am more than just the guy who gives people sight back. I am so much more than what people need. I am so much more than what people want. He's what people need. And here we get to the fifth I am in John out of 7. Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and I am the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. What? The one who believes in me will live even though they die. We will all face death. There's no hiding from that. There's no hidden trick to that. But Jesus says, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. We will also be in eternity with the Father for those who believe. There is so much more, Jesus is saying, than this time on earth, this blink of an eye. There is so much more at work here that I've come to do. Do you believe this? And she said to Jesus, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is come into the world. Martha's confession. Martha's confession in her pain. Martha's confession in her emotion. Martha's confession in her brokenness. Remember, Lazarus has still died. She doesn't say, I know you are the Messiah. I know you have come in to the Son of God who's come to save the world, but you still could have healed my brother. Like even more so, Martha has this revelation moment where she says, Lord, you are the Messiah. Even more so, wouldn't our reaction to be, if you are the Messiah, then why weren't you here? If you are the Messiah, then why didn't you do what the Messiah is meant to do? Why is my brother dead? Why am I going through this? And in her pain, in her anguish, in her grief, she confesses Jesus to be the Messiah. Do you believe this is often the part of this verse left out at funerals? I am the resurrection and the life, Jesus says. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever believes in me will never die. And you cut it out there. It's a beautiful thing to say at a funeral. It's a beautiful thing to say to people who need comfort. Maybe they believe in God, maybe they don't. Very commonly read. But what's never read is, do you believe this? Jesus needed to know, or Jesus needed to challenge Martha's faith, even in her grief. That says, hey, you believed I'm the Messiah before Lazarus died. Do you still believe I'm the Messiah even though he's dead? Do you still believe I'm the Messiah, not before your circumstance, not after your circumstance, but in the middle of the hurricane? Do you still believe that I am the one who is going to bring salvation? And after she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. She said to Mary, the teacher is here. She said, and he's asking for you. When Mary heard this, she quickly got up and went to him. She quickly got up and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village. Remember, he's not even in the village. Not only is he not at the house, he's not even in the village. He is outside. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still the place where Martha met him. And when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went, they all went. They think maybe she's going to the tomb. Maybe she needs something. And you love this picture that Mary is going after Martha has spoken to Jesus. Would you love to know what Martha's composition was after speaking to Jesus? Would you love to know if she had some sort of peace? If she had some sort of saying, hey, Mary, there's something else going on at work here, whether Martha knew it or not. And Mary goes out and they all followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. And when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. We just had this same discourse. We just had this same conversation. Martha doesn't go to Mary and says, hey, you say this, he's going to say this, and you say that he's the Messiah, and it's all going to work out. And Mary has to have her own confrontation, her own encounter with Jesus. You can't live off somebody else's confession, no matter how close they are to you. I cannot live off my parents' faith. They're not going to be here forever. And when I face challenges, I'm sorry, if you're not following the story, that's like pretty evident. But when I face challenges and they're not around, I face challenges that doesn't challenge their faith. It is my faith that's on the line. This is Mary's faith, that Mary still says, if only. And don't please don't lie to yourself this morning and say, I don't have any if-onlys. I'm not walking through any if-onlys. I haven't already buried some if-onlys. That, Lord, if you had been there, but you weren't, and you didn't turn up, so hey. When Jesus saw her weeping, 100% man, 100% God. When he saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. And she said to him, come and see. Interesting that most of the times in the Bible, Jesus would say, come and see to people. Most of the times he would say, hey, come and see what I can do for you. Come and see what I can offer you. I don't think it's any secret that he knew Lazarus was already in the tomb. But his goal was not to go to the tomb by himself. His goal was to go to the tomb, to be taken there, that everybody would follow. It's not a coincidence the disciples are with him. It's not a coincidence the Jews have come from Bethany. It's not even a coincidence that they got up at the same time as Mary got up. But they are all going. They are all going to the tomb. In verse 35, if you need a Bible verse to memorize during the week, this is the Bible verse a teacher will pick out for you that they haven't prepared anything, and that would be me on my occasion. But we used to, as a side note, me and my brother, sometimes a couple of friends, we used to be like, and Jesus wept because he didn't put money in the offering. Or Jesus wept because he didn't do that thing for that person. It's so easy to take this out of context. It's just not an ironic or a funny or whatever Jesus wept. This is Jesus weeping. This is Jesus meeting them at their emotional grief. This is the Bible. This is John saying to you, hey, when you face troubles and hardships, when you face the tomb, Jesus meets you there. When you face things that, hey, I don't want to walk through, Jesus meets you there. Not so he can say, sorry, I wasn't here. Oh, actually, if you had done this, I actually would have come through. But so that he can meet you in your pain. He can relate to you in your pain. We can find the comfort and his peace. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. Third time, John has mentioned how much he loved them. But some of them said, could not he who have opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? The question isn't really even if Jesus could have kept the man from dying. It's why didn't you? It's not, the question is never if you could or if you would. It's why haven't. It's if only. And sometimes we identify ourselves with Mary and Martha and the Jews that came along. Sometimes we are just stuck in our grief. We are so caught up in our pain, and that's real. Don't get me wrong, but that we fail to see not only where God was or where God should have been, we fail to see God where he is in the moment. There are neurological studies done by theologians, Pastor Beck, been going through lately with the stuff that would say, if you enter into a moment, if you go back, look at different circumstances, good and bad, where is Jesus? Not was Jesus there, but ask yourself, where is Jesus? In hindsight, where do I see where God was? Not when I couldn't perceive him then, but now where do I see where he is? And he is with Mary and Martha. He is with you if you identify with them in this pain, in this loss this morning. And Jesus, verse 38, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And he said to them, take away the stone. Surely Jesus can I'm going to use a bad analogy, but in Star Wars, they have the Force, and you kind of just push out your hand and things happen. Surely Jesus could have moved the tomb. Surely Jesus could have touched the stone and it would have just rolled away, right? Surely Jesus could have done this for what he's about to do. But he says to them, take away the stone. And Martha says to him, Lord, my brothers have been dead 4 days. It's going to stink. By this time, there was a bad odor. He's already been dead 4 days. Lord, why are we doing this? Remember, his soul has gone. The heaviest part, the most significant part of the morning is done. Of mourning is done. Lord, why are we doing this? Why are we here? And Jesus said to her again, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Did I not tell you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And sometimes we get asked to do things. Sometimes it feels like the Holy Spirit is prompting us to do something. He says, that's already too late. That's already God. You don't understand. If you had to do it this way, you had to do it my way for the miracle to happen. And Jesus, with everybody, with the disciples who were probably still looking over their shoulder to see if any of these Jews were throwing stones at them before, Mary and Martha are still in their grief, and Jews who had traveled 2 miles to come and bring comfort, they all go back to the tomb. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be one of the guys pushing away the stone. It's not exactly a glorious job. Also, you're going to get the odor first. So you're going to know that it stinks. They're like, that's not glorious either. But Jesus says, push away the stone. So they took away the stone. I love that. John's like, so they took it away. They followed Jesus. Like, yeah, it's a good idea. And Jesus looked up and said, and this is pivotal. There's no muttering under his breath. There's no kind of things that people might have questioned. There's no kind of things that they even thought back in ancient times when a magician or somebody trying to do something spooky, spiritual, or evil would mutter under their breath so that no one could hear what they're doing as the band would start to come. He says out aloud, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I have said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. His hands and his feet were wrapped with strips of linen, cloth around his face. It seems very mummy-esque that Lazarus would just kind of walk out, can't see. But Lazarus walks out. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes, let him go. Take off the symbols of death. They would have buried him a specific way. They would have prepared him a specific way. They would have cleaned him. The linen would have been wrapped. This all signifies somebody has died. He's not even buried in his best suit or his Sunday best. He's buried like they would have ceremonially buried people before him. He is dead. And Jesus calls out Lazarus by name. It's maybe the only point we get to Lazarus. And maybe you identify with Lazarus. Maybe you don't feel like you've buried something that's died. Maybe you feel like you have died. Maybe you feel like there's something in you that is just empty. There's something in you that the stone has been rolled across, and until God's come and says, take that stone away, it's not moving. It's not budging. He doesn't just say, come out. He calls Lazarus by name. He does not just say, rise, come out, let's go, let's do this. He said, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus walks out. And Jesus says to them, take off the grave clothes, take off the symbol of death, take off what is holding him back. He is now alive. We cannot do this alone. Andy Stanley would say that Jesus manufactured this sign. And maybe that feels a bit heavy to take this morning. Maybe that feels a bit heavy in spite of what your circumstance may be. But Jesus manufactured the sign. He knew that he did not go with the servant. He knew that he didn't just get here as he died and then healed him and he's come back. As other healings we have of people who have died in the Gospels. This isn't just something that happens bang, bang, they're back. This is 4 days later. This is way past the moment of hope. This is way past the moment of possibility. Jesus would manufacture a miracle so that the disciples may believe, so that Mary and Martha and the Jews may believe, so that Lazarus may be the sign, so that you and I may believe. That you and I can stand on this side of the cross, that we may believe. They took the stone away, they took off the bandages, and they witnessed and were a part of the sign. In verse 45, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary had seen what Jesus did and believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. And they called a big meeting with everybody. The elders, all the different factions of the Jewish religious hierarchy, they called a big meeting. And this is it, man. This has to stop. They don't deny the sign. They don't deny what he's done. But they do not believe who he is. They do not believe who he is. They willfully stayed in the dark and in their blindness. Even John 3:19, John would already write that. They love the praise of man more than the praise of God. They're so worried about what Jesus is going to do. They're so worried about that they say, hey, the death of one man is better that we would save this nation. But they don't see that the death of this man is going to deliver this nation. They don't even understand that they're playing a part. But if only they had believed. It even says further on that so many of them believed, yet they did not want to profess this. They did not want to because they were scared of the whole. They were scared so that Jesus no longer moved around publicly the people of Judea, that he withdrew to a region near the wilderness to Ephraim where he stayed with his disciples. And as we get into chapter 12, or we get closer to the Easter story, we would see Jesus riding on the donkey. We would see Jesus make his procession into Jerusalem. We would see Jesus start to say, hey, this is the time. This is the time for me to come out of hiding. The Pharisees did not want to live in the light. And yet they stayed in the darkness. And I think even sometimes we can identify with the Pharisees. We're so not sure of God. We're so not sure of Jesus, who he said he is. We might think he's a man that did things. But if I'm going to believe he's the resurrection and the life, I have to give everything. I have to give everything. And Stephen Furtick would say that God's love is not our love, but rather his love equates to our trust in him. That his timing, obedience in him is everything, and that it's all in his timing. John is not writing to prove to us that Jesus was real and did some nice things, but John's purpose is to write that many people may believe. John 20:31. I could have memorized. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples which are not recorded in the book. They either underlined in my Bible would say the purpose for John's gospel. But these are written that you may believe. What has been written, what has been jotted down is written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Not that he can perform miracles. Not that he was a great guy. Not even that he just died and then somehow came back. But that he is the Messiah, the Son of God. And that believing you may have life in his name. Whoever lives will not die, and whoever believes, even though they die, will live. And it's easy to say that when you are not in the circumstance. It's much easier to believe before the circumstance. Warren Weaselbury would note that the last enemy Jesus had to conquer was death. Jesus cannot be the life and resurrection if death still has power. Jesus cannot be who he says he is if he did not defeat the grave. And obviously this story of Lazarus is a parallel or a sign for a forward, or whatever you want to say, for what is to come. For when Mary and Martha would get to the tomb and the stone's already moved. They didn't have to move it this time. But he's not there, and the cloths, the death, the bandages that symbolize death were already on the bed. They were so worried someone had stolen Jesus, they missed the point of what was happening until Jesus encounters them, has an encounter in the garden. What tombs have you created today? What is your Lazarus? I thought of maybe trying to find a story, something I might work in my sermon, but honestly, we all have our own Lazarus. Whether it be physical or sickness, whether it be something we're holding on to we can't let go, whether it be something we've let go of that we shouldn't have let go of. We all have our own Lazarus. So we're going to open up this time for ministry. I know I've got my own Lazarus that I'm arguing with God. Hey God, I think I'm doing the right thing. I think we're doing the right thing, God, but this isn't happening. There's nothing coming through. You just got to wait in his timing, right? You just got to stay there with him. Everybody has a Lazarus. Everybody has a turn your life took that you didn't see coming and that God didn't prevent. Stephen Furtick would say, it's not that God didn't see it coming, but he didn't prevent. This is an emotional place. It's not a physical place. It's an emotional place where only Jesus can go, where only he can resurrect what you thought he did not heal. He loves you so much that he let the one he loved die, so that he might bring life, so that people might believe, and that the gospel might even start spreading before Jesus has even come back from the tomb. And again, it's easy to say this when we have insight into hindsight. But John 3:16, he already spoils what he's going to do. That God sent his one and only Son, that whoever would believe, the key word is believe. This believe is mentioned 8 times in this chapter alone. John's trying to say, hey, don't believe that this happened, believe who he is. And don't even believe that this only happened, believe for Lazarus, believe that this can happen for you. He is calling you out by name. So wherever you identify today, wherever you find yourself in the story, we're going to open this up. We're going to open the altar up. Not because we believe that anything in coming forward will give you something that staying in your seats will not. But rather, we believe that coming forward and saying, hey to God, hey, I feel like the disciples and where you're taking me is messy. I feel like Mary and Martha and you've already come too late. It's too late. I feel like Lazarus and I already feel like I'm in the tomb. Or I feel like I'm the Pharisee and I don't know how to believe. Whatever your Lazarus is, he is calling you out this morning by name. Thank you, Beck.
Why don't you